Good morning, Carol.
Good morning. How are you?
Welcome to St. Louis Press Club's Hour in the Now series. I would like for you to introduce yourself, your position, and we'll go from there, please.
Well, my name is Carol Daniel, and I am a news anchor at KMOX Radio in St. Louis, Missouri. We are owned by Intercom Communications.
Thank you, because I wanted to get into that corporate aspect of things, especially in these times, but I'd like to add, as a member of the St. Louis Press Club, that you are a recent Media Person of the Year honoree. Our pleasure to keep repeating that, certainly. And with that comes longevity, excellence, experience. Would you speak to those, please, with regard to what has happened to our community in the last 5-6 months?
Oh, longevity and excellence. It's hard to think of excellence in the midst of a pandemic when you are, in some cases, just thinking about survival. And so the information that we are trying to give to people, that's certainly an issue of excellence, because for me, excellence means factual information. It means knowing what is going on and telling your listeners, your viewers, your readers, exactly what they need to know to stay safe. Longevity, that's an interesting thing to discuss, because having been there a long time, I've been at KMOX Radio for 25 years.
Yeah, congratulations on that. Wasn't that was this year, 25?
That was this,
in April.
Yes. This year in April, I celebrated 25 years and over 30 in the industry. That we always say that we always use that phrase, institutional knowledge, that it really helps to know the community that you're covering. It helps to understand who is who and why is why and where they're from and who they are and who to contact for any given thing. So longevity makes a difference. When you have something brand new that you are covering, I do believe longevity still has its place, because longevity gives you maturity. It gives you a sense of knowing, but this is brand new. And so we're reporting on things and phrases and issues that we've never reported on. I shouldn't say never, but in this way. We have had pandemics before, but this one is unlike any other.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
No, you go ahead.
Well, this notion of usage of words, phrases, facts, how does all that play into your journalism? Talk about those meetings where you're working with your colleagues and you have to come up with the right words for the time, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and I will explain my position, which will in part answer the question, that as an anchor, and it's different at our radio station. So we have a morning drive team that is on the air, and they have an editor who places their newscast, who stacks, as we say, the newscast in order. So the stories they will cover will be in order. The teases they will cover, they will use will be in order. And then the anchors are in the studio reading that. For my position, I don't have an editor. And so I am my own editor. So I am taking the information the reporters are, and we're using a mechanism called Slack, which allows people to communicate on one platform online. They can send their audio even to that platform, and I will then record it from the computer. And so we have one reporter in the field. And so he is sending in information. He's sending in stories. But I don't have an editor. So in terms of what phrasing is used, that's on me. And creativity, all of that comes into play, to decide how to say, what to say, and when to say, because I have news every 30 minutes from 11 to 4 every 30 minutes, and then 4 to 6 I'm on the air. That's our afternoon drive. So we do have meetings on Slack in the morning, and they are typed. People are entering what stories they're covering, where they're going that day. Their ideas bounced around on via Slack. So that's the manner in which we discuss with one another, what's the news of the day and what we're covering that day.
Good. When were you ushered out of the home office? Well, ushered out of the office downtown
Well,
and going to your home office?
that is a good question. I am in my home office right now, but I am a part of the skeleton crew that is still going into the studio. So we have about 100 employees, and there are probably 10 of us who have been working in the building throughout the pandemic. And so what that means is an empty parking garage. It means lights are off in the hallway as if it's, no one is there, but there's always somebody there in a radio station, of course, because it's 24/7. And so that has been a surreal experience. Most people are working from home, but we are a part of the skeleton crew that is still in the building. And of late, more of a handful, and I mean 2 people, have started to come back into the newsroom. But from March to just about 3 weeks ago, to the end of June, probably, we were there. I would be there by myself often for about 4 hours during the day, by myself in the newsroom. There are a couple of producers that were there, but I was the only news person in the newsroom by myself. And I wasn't the only one who was by myself for some length of time, but it weighed on me. I will say that it definitely weighed on me.
I would imagine then that longevity and experience helped.
Exactly.
So talk about that corporate relationship and the messages that were coming down, especially during this time. We've got COVID, and then we have the George Floyd killing and the aftermath. Talk about the corporate messages and the meetings that were taking place between KMOX radio and corporate.
And there are, in the hierarchy, I used to jokingly say that I am not even on the totem pole. And so they're definitely, from our general manager, our program director, perhaps our news director, having meetings with corporate. I was not in any of those corporate meetings, but then you do get the emails from the president of the organization. We get regular emails from David Fields discussing where we are and what he thinks about certain things. And there were more email following the George Floyd murder than the pandemic, I would say. So the messaging was of a corporate nature that, we believe in diversity and we support communication. And so those kinds of messages were delivered. The company is doing certain things from a corporate standpoint. The messaging during the pandemic was that, we are so grateful for your continued work. We know this is difficult. Let us know if there's anything we can do. We were getting those corporate messages as well. And even locally, excuse me, from our general manager and our program director and our news director, getting some of that messaging. But there's something about longevity too, that I will say that there's an expectation that you know what you're doing. You've been there a long time. You've been through things before. You can handle it. There is that unspoken expectation, which I carry with me.
Lucky for our community, truly.
Well, thank you.
From the standpoint of I shouldn't say just safety. Safety is extremely important and a message that institutions are dealing with.
Were they giving that message?
Yes, I mean, for yourself internally. I mean, what have been some of the messages with regard to the safety of the employees?
Well, there was a decision that people who were at home needed to stay home, and you couldn't just come back and forth in the station because the thought process from the CDC was to reduce your numbers. You couldn't have any more than 10 people, in a space. And so people who were told to work at home needed to work at home. You couldn't just arrive, because you forgot something. And I didn't see that necessarily happening, but that was a clear message. And, that we wear masks. There was hand sanitizer everywhere. The building was cleaned. My goodness, I don't know what's going on.
Have a sip of that coffee.
Yeah, the building was cleaned on a more regular basis. We were given masks to wear at one point. We have one field reporter. We were given one of those long boom, basically a boom mic, a stick that you could attach your phone to, so that they could social distance while they were out in the field covering stories. But in the building, we were, wash your hands. There were signs posted in our break room area in the kitchen, what the symptoms are. That was early on. And there's just the biggest jug of hand sanitizer I've ever seen in the building. And then every person has that all over the place. So we've just been doing, I think, what most companies do to keep the building physically clean and to impress upon employees, us, that you need to take care of yourself.
I would imagine, though, this is me speaking, the sensibilities of the reporters, the team, the going, meeting the deadline, being live, being radio, all that enters into, well, sometimes you forget about those things because the story is what matters.
It's interesting you say that. We had a conversation with my co-host in the afternoon recently that this was probably about 3 weeks ago, that I remember going home that evening, and usually I would go home and wash my hands before I would touch my husband, before I would, try to go in the house, and would go straight to the bathroom and wash my hands. And mind you that I'm in a newsroom and I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not around anyone. And so that night I got home and I forgot to do it for the first time. And he and I thought, are we growing so accustomed? It's been so long that now are we relaxing and we shouldn't? But I will give you a sense that every hour, when I go to the newsroom today, I will wipe down my desk. Now, I don't think anybody sits at my desk, but I don't know who's there overnight. I don't know. So I wipe down my desk, hand sanitizer, and then I start working. When I go into the studio to do the news, every hour I use hand sanitizer. Yeah. And then when I leave the studio, I have to open a door, go back to my desk, and I try to remember to use hand sanitizer because I've touched the doorknob. So I don't know that there's only one other person who will be in and out of that studio during the day, and that's one of our producers. And I know he's using hand sanitizer. He has 3 boys under the age of 4 at home. So I know he's using hand sanitizer himself, but we are trying to, be in that habit. And I'm married. One of our children lives with us. He's 24. And we have our son is 20. He lives in Kansas City. But my parents are in a nursing home here, about 10 minutes from my house. And so although I don't get to physically touch them, they are in the forefront of my mind of keeping myself.
You've given me a segue, the natural segue. I have your book. I guess it's 8, 9 years old. I have an autographed copy.
Thank you.
But it's about marriage, family, and relationships.
Yes.
Those sensibilities are uppermost in your core, your everything. And how do those fit in again in this atmosphere of, pandemic, and then of course with unrest and new discussions, et cetera, et cetera. Those must be prominent for you.
For me, everything is about relationship and I go back to longevity. People who have listened for a long time or listening for the first time, I need them to feel like I am someone that they know and that they trust. Because if you know me, you'll trust me. And if you feel like you do know me, then you'll secondly think that you can trust me. And that relationship is so important. And we use that phrase when you crack the mic, when you turn the mic on, that there is such an opportunity, such an honor, and such a responsibility with the words that I'm about to use. And even if it is as simple as a road is closed, even if it is as entertaining as there's a concert in a parking lot, Girl Scout cookies are going on sale, even if it is that information that isn't necessarily life or death, but it is about the human spirit and the human connection. And so, for me, being a mother and being a wife, it was always important to me. My kids are, young adults now, as I said, but it was always important for me that they know what I did for a living when I wasn't with them. So I took them to everywhere that I could. And then it became important to me that they knew what work meant and that my work was important and that it was relevant and that not only the work, but what the work was, that what I was saying was important. We've had discussions about various things over the years. And I have Black sons and a Black husband. And so those, conversations were even more pointed about their safety and their lives and their, really about their worth. That was really important to me too. And so I do filter my work through who I am. You can't help but do that. So I want to elevate because that's what mothers do. I want to improve your life because that's what mothers do. That's what friends do. That's what wives do. That's what neighbors do. And we're in relationship. And so because my relationships mean so much to me, my job means so much to me. And what I say, therefore, means so much to me because I'm hoping it means much to the people that are hearing this information. And it's, there's a lot of gloom out there. So it's been a difficult position to tell people in some cases what they don't want to hear.
It sounds as if the obstacles that have befallen us, during this time have actually enhanced in some ways, for you, enhanced the storytelling. Would you agree with that?
I would, and I will say that one of the reasons that is true is being alone. I see the curiosity in your face right now. Those months that I was alone in the newsroom, and you're not really alone, but you're physically alone. It was almost as if I felt like I needed to be more expressive. And it was helpful for me to, when I was at the mic, it's like the end of the world and you're the only one there and there's a microphone and the people are out there and they are huddled in their homes and they are not leaving and their shades are drawn, but this information is still coming through. They are huddled around the radio like never before, or their phones, in this case, their computers, to hear something. And so I knew that. Now that's a dramatic, portrayal of what was going on. But I knew that, and so it was helpful for me that I could still communicate. So even though I was physically alone, I knew that I was still communicating. People were still hearing me. You guys are still out there, right? You're still out there, right? Is this thing on? Is this thing on? Kind of a thing. But it was on, and people are still out there, and they are, in some cases, desperate for information. And so, yes, the answer is yes, it did. It did make me feel that way.
Yeah, you've given some new perspective here to that collaborative strategy, the collaborative team that makes all this work in this profession. But the new part of this is that solo experience, that being alone and what it means and how you manage. It's fascinating. So I really appreciate that point of view. Carol, this has been terrific.
Oh, and we could go on. There's so many more aspects of what life has been like for journalists and storytellers.
Will you speak just a little bit more to that? We would appreciate.
Sure.
Please.
Sure. Because clearly there is objection to what we say and what we do, and in some sense, we remain under siege as it relates to what the White House is portraying and what others are portraying. There is a split. And so trying to cut through that and just be factual. There are challenges on a weekly basis to what we say. Certainly in regards to the president and to party politics. So that has, as you think of, as a Black woman, for instance, that African Americans being more likely to die or be severely harmed by coronavirus, by COVID-19. It's personal for me. And the notion that people object to some of the things we are saying or feel that we are trying to damage the president's reelection it's a lot of things. It's frustrating, it's sad, it's professionally offensive. I don't have a role in that. And so it's been a challenging time as a journalist. And then not to mention the civil unrest and George Floyd and the politics of race and all of that has been even more challenging to cover. We've had so many calls and from people who are upset with whatever, certain things we reported, or they don't think they're worth reporting, or so it's and this is not new. I mean, we went through Ferguson here in St. Louis, so we know. Yeah. So that has made it even more challenging to be in a newsroom alone in a parking garage and a deserted downtown and tumbleweeds blowing through and coyotes walking. It's just even more surreal that on top of that some of your audience doesn't believe you and they think you have an axe to grind is even more frustrating and sad.
There were lessons to learn during Ferguson, of course. To talk about those a little bit with regard to the lessons learned and how perhaps you've put those into effect during this time.
Well, in every news organization has its own Monday morning quarterbacking that they needed to do, when we should always do when we're covering historic events, because you only have one chance to get it right. And I have used the phrase, are we on the right side of history or the wrong side of history? In covering what we know are historic events. So we are in a unique position in that I am in a newsroom and I am an educated journalist. At the same time, it is a talk radio station also. So you have people doing their talk shows who are not objective, and then you have a newsroom that is objective. And so some of the lessons learned, I would say that I would have pushed, we had a handful of reporters who were in the field. They had bulletproof vests at one point. They were in and around gunfire on a variety of occasions. I would have, perhaps we needed more mental health counseling for our own wellness during that time, more check-ins during that time. We needed maybe more huddles during that time as reporters and management. I would have pushed personally. I was in the studio. I was not out in the field because I am a news anchor. And I would have pushed to be out in the field more. That's definitely a personal, professional change I would have made. And there would have been more arguments at the assignment board, what we're covering, how we're covering it. We had different management then than we do now. But it prompted me to become more involved in my field. It was after Ferguson that I decided to become active again with the Greater St. Louis Association of Black Journalists. I had not been active because I had been raising children, and that was a decision that I made. And so I ran for president the next it was a year and a half later. So it prompted me to do some things differently in my own career. But I think every news organization would have to look at itself, and I know that many did. There was one organization in St. Louis that brought in African-American reporters from another market to cover the story. I've not spoken to their management team. I don't know what that decision-making was about, but the optics of it did not look good to me. Are you saying that you didn't have enough Black reporters in your own newsroom to cover the story? Or did you just need more bodies on the ground to cover the story? They just happened to all be Black that you brought in to cover the story. There was some diversity training that I think we all needed. Bias came out in a lot of reporters. So you have to just have that on the front end. You know, you're covering people, all kinds of backgrounds. And so I think by and large, many news organizations learned a thing or two, as did we, and as did I.
Your questions were very important. And those are important discussions to have in terms of mirroring the community, mirroring your community. What's in the newsroom, and are you mirroring the community? So if you were to name a couple of silver linings that have come as a result of your experiences these last 5-6 months, what might they be?
Oh, maybe I'll cry. My 20-year-old, unlike most families, I was still going to work. My husband is a landscaper, so construction is considered essential. So he has still been going out in the field and working. So we are not most families who have been home and hunkered and working from the home offices. We've all been out. But my 20-year-old, when college students had to come home because schools shut down, 2 weeks before that happened, he got a job. He's a theater major at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. But if not an actor, he is a foodie, such a chef. Not trained, but he's an excellent cook. So he got a job at Whole Foods 2 weeks before the shutdown. And so when we called to say, and this is what I've, silver lining. So I said, are you coming home? No, I just got a job. And I applied to work here. It's on campus, applied to work here 3 times before. And I finally got an interview and I got the job. And so he decided not to come home to do online classes. And so I had, I don't know how many nightmares, so worried about him. And I think that he missed us too. But the silver lining was that to see your own children grow and exhibit maturity and strength in the midst of your own constant worry is definitely a silver lining. So I've seen his strength as a young man. I've been able to see that. Another silver lining is, I love to cook, but I really didn't always have time. My husband and I, when we first started dating, we were cooking together, and so that has happened again. We're cooking together. That has been a silver lining. And for me personally, my parents were ill before the pandemic. We were making decisions during the pandemic. They needed to move. They could no longer live on their own. And so we had to make the decision during a pandemic to move our parents into an assisted living facility. My mother has dementia, so they're in a memory care unit. And the silver lining is that 5 years ago, when this particular facility was built, we talked to our parents about moving there. They had apartments they could have moved in 5 years ago. And so it's 10 minutes from my house, and they are there. And the silver lining is, because during the pandemic, I know this. This is again filtered through the lens of a mother, that there is a pandemic, but marriages are still coming together and falling apart. Children are still getting ill. Car accidents were still happening, even though there were fewer people on the road. Firefighters still had a job to do. So life was still unfolding during this pandemic. And I was witnessing that personally. My parents were still, my dad's health was failing during the pandemic. So they lived two hours away, and my siblings and I were going to help and care for them during the pandemic. We had to. And so the silver lining is that they are well, and they are in a fantastic facility, and they are close to us. That is a silver lining. There may be silver linings related to work, but they matter less to me than my 20-year-old being safe, and being a proven young man, and my parents being safe and healthy and close, and my husband and I getting to cook together again.
Have you made any bread?
I have made chicken and dumplings from scratch. I made biscuits from scratch. I have a bread machine, and I use the bread machine. So I've not done the sourdough starter thing, but I did make biscuits from scratch, which were amazing. Some are in the freezer now as we speak. So,
wow. I wanted to end on a lighter note. Everything was extremely thought-provoking, deep, from professional and personal, and that's what we wanted to do here in our Now series for the St. Louis Press Club. And we hope, of course, that both people in the field as well as the general community can appreciate all these pieces of information that have come out from people like you who serve our community so well. So on behalf of the St. Louis Press Club, Carol Daniel, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's wonderful. It's wonderful honestly, it's wonderful to be heard. We need to hear each other.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Likewise. Thank you.